I'm Steve Oakers, and we are doing leadership conversations with me, Steve, and Miss Megan. And then we've got our boy, Mr. Aaron Buer, on the line today from Ada
That's
Bible
nice.
Church. Yeah. So sorry we're running a couple minutes late. We just thought that that was the trend of the day. You know, the governor started it with her, public announcements starting at 10:30, which really happened at about 10:50 after most of the announcements were already online of the closing of schools. But we just thought we'd keep that going for today. So sorry, folks, for being a couple minutes behind, but Aaron Buer is a pretty important dude. And so he had some stuff we were in the middle of. So it's good. Mr. Buer, thank you for joining us.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Can you just give us an overview of who you are so anybody that doesn't know you could get an understanding of sort of where your space is, right? So what your role is as a leader within the community, and then also give us just a quick overview of family, who Katie is, who the hordes of kids you have are, those kind of things.
That was unkind. Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. Okay, so I am a pastor at Ada Bible Church, which is a pastor in town here in Grand Rapids. And my role there, I have a couple roles. I'm a teaching pastor, so I preach on weekends here and there. And I'm also what's called the director of weekend ministries. And so if there is a ministry that happens on the weekend, students, children, worship, that kind of stuff, that falls under my leadership. And so I sit on the executive team, and we're learning a lot about leadership right now in this season. And so there's no playbook, it turns out. Personally, I am married, have been married for somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 years. Don't hold me to that specific date. I already got in trouble in one video recently for getting that date wrong. And yeah, we have 5 kids. And so our house is a little bit crazy right now, but great kids and everything. But, I think everybody's dealing with just being cooped up and trying to figure this season out. So that's me.
Yeah. Awesome. So how many people then, so can you give us an understanding on your organization of Ada Bible Church a second, just so that people understand, because I know it because I attend there, but there's a lot that don't, right? So how big is this thing you're talking about leading? How many people are coming in the doors for the weekend experience that you would be leading? And then what is that staffing side of it? Like how many staff report up to you?
Sure. Okay, so we're a multi-site church. That's sort of the technical name in church world, which if you're not a church person, apologies for all the technicality. So that means we have 4 different locations. We had, when we were meeting in person, somewhere, close to 9,000 people coming on a weekend.
Wow.
Now we're in a different space, where we're tracking our numbers differently because it's live stream. And so I don't know really last weekend we had something like 11,000 connections, so I don't know how to measure that. I'm not sure how entirely important that is, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then in terms of we have 106 and I'm going to just say somewhere around 50 people report to me right now.
Okay. And then there's people obviously that report. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. So we talked about this before, but weekend experience has completely shifted, right? From the motto or the model of congregating or coming together as a congregation in these buildings that you have. How have you, it seems like life has changed so fast to me, but in just like a short period of time. So it's like everything's changing, but it feels like, what day is it? It feels like it's only been a day or two, right? Like, so how have you shifted so quickly? And how are you leading in that space to be able to shift into whatever the new world is for you? And how long do you look at that as that shift being the way that you're going to operate?
Okay. Yeah. Oh man, great question. On the one hand, I feel like we kind of cheated, or we're ahead of the curve on this whole thing, because the way we do our services is we broadcast a single preacher to our other campuses. And so we already had all the infrastructure in place to what we call live stream, our services. And we already had a bunch of people watching online. I would say somewhere around 2,000 people on a weekend. And it's usually, people with little kids or people who are sick or, on vacation. But we already had this culture of, when things are different, we watch online. And so we had all the cameras, we had all the technology. And so on the one hand, we just did what we always do. And so I was preaching the first weekend where we were not allowed to meet in person. And, the restrictions have changed over time. And so at that time, I had a handful of people in the room. I had them sitting just, a little bit in front of the camera. And so I could, kind of feel like I was connecting with people, but be looking directly into the camera. And so on the one hand, we've weathered this very naturally. Now, another big aspect of our church is small groups. When you're a church our size, you need smaller communities to actually be in relationship with people and to walk with people, which, was what church is all about. And so we have, lots and lots of small groups meeting all over the city on a regular basis. Now that whole thing has been flipped on its head. And so we're trying to help people, meet in small groups through Zoom or through FaceTime or Microsoft Teams or whatever. And that is working. There's some people that are obviously resistant to that, they can't figure out the technology or, whatever. And so that's been a real challenge.
Right.
You asked about how did you word that question? Trying to lead in this area?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. How are you leading? I mean, even in the idea of a small group, right? So we all, you have a company, right? I think of the organization of Ada Bible Church or any nonprofit as still a company. It's just faith-based, right?
Sure.
And because of being faith-based or a nonprofit, it's just a different kind of tax code, right? But ultimately, you're running income comes in, however it comes in, and expenses go out, right? And so you're having to shift in the model that you're in. So even in that training on small groups, have you shifted all the way to a point where you're doing training to teach small groups how to get on Zoom? Like, how do you even download the app? Like, those, where is that space? I mean, Kirsten and I, to do this, we had to practice like 5 times over the last 4 days to try to be like, okay, this is how you even begin to do this. And I'm not bad at technology. It's not like my strong suit, but still, I'm like, wow, this is not an easy task.
Yeah, we have, thankfully, a lot of our training has already been online. I'm thinking of our women's ministry and men's ministry, for example, which is almost entirely small group space. The way that they do their training for their, hundreds of leaders is through, it had been through videos or through, some kind of Zoom gathering or something. And so we already had the mechanism for delivering, now here's how you, but it's a challenge. I'm kind of stereotyping a little bit, but often a mature person that, would lead a small group might be a little bit older, not always, but, and now you're getting into, okay, Zoom what? And, my grandkids call me on FaceTime, but I've never actually, hosted it. And so there has been a bit of, and now here's how you do it, and here's how you download it. And we've had to go through all those things, just trying to make it as seamless and simple as possible. But, the results are a bit hit and miss, I think, depending on where people are at.
Yep. So I think that some of the questions that Megan and I have had when we're discussing this too is like, you have your leadership you have within your structure, right? Of the ministry that you do, the 160 people that are employees or the 50 that come up to you. And we can get into that a little bit more, but also within a faith base or within the way that Megan and I operate within our companies, it's servicing others, right? It's not just within the core group. It's like, how do we, in the nonprofit world, is how do we connect with more people? How do we build more relationships? So has Ada or has your organization, like, how are you going out to touch people that isn't just your people? Like, how do you
Yeah.
balance that like world where how do we get outside of our own just protective box? Like, hey, I gotta make sure my box is good before I do
Mhm.
anything else. It's like, how are you jumping out into the greater world outside of just what your box looks like right now?
That's a great question. And I am sure that it can appear at times that a large church like us, that we are just about getting bigger or more, et cetera. But we really are about the church. And that's, a phrase that I use for every church in our region, and we really want to be about investing in and helping and supporting and learning from other churches.
Hmm.
And so one thing that we've been able to do is we have all the infrastructure and the technology and the expertise to live stream. And there's been a bunch of churches in our community that's like in one weekend, they had to figure out how to get online. It's like, okay, you're not allowed to meet anymore. And now it's okay, we've never done this before. So crash course. And so there's been a number of churches that we have consulted with. I mean, everyday conversations going on. There's been a few churches that we've been able to provide technical know-how or resources, equipment, set up for that kind of stuff. But we've tried to be really creative, and we just want to help as many churches as possible get moving and get online. And people are smart, and we've been all figuring out like new ways. But it has been a real privilege and a joy to be able to come alongside some great churches in our city and help. And at the same time, I think we've been learning a lot from other churches and practices that they've been, we've been partnering with different churches, trying to work together to help some local ministries, particularly around the area of food for families. As
Yeah.
all the schools shut down, it's like, okay, now there's a bunch of kids that need meals, that rely on the public school system for meals. And so we've been privileged to partner with some organizations in that area as well. And so I don't know, we're just trying to do what we can to support people who know what they're doing and are connected in the areas that we're not. And let's not reinvent the wheel, and it has to be us, but let's invest in other people. And then where we can share some of our know-how and expertise, and hopefully it's just a good partnership across our city and helping people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've mentioned, Megan, do you got a question at all or no?
I think it's such an interesting thing to think about. Of course you were live streaming things, long before that. And the difference between collaboration and then competitiveness. And, what I've watched with like our association, I teach during orientation. So they're saying, would you be willing to teach these classes online? And part of me says, no, I don't really want to be recorded online. And then the other part of me is like, well, Volker's just put me all over the interwebs while we do this thing. I have to be comfortable with it. And I'm already on Failure Lab and all kinds of other things. Why wouldn't I want to do this online? But just the difference in of heart center. I said to Steve, I was already sheltering in place, but as soon as Whitmore said that I had to, I had a very different feeling about it.
Yeah.
I didn't want to. And today I had to decide between going to CrossFit, online, of course, right? Or being on this. So I was like, well, I'll just wear my CrossFit clothes to this. So the new normal of space, and watching some people, fight it. And then other people sort of have this radical acceptance of this is where we are and how do I show up to serve?
Mm-hmm.
And really, you're a business. I sit on personnel committee for my church. It's still a business. It's a 501c3, nonprofit style business. But the beauty in it for me, I think, has been seeing some people lean into not, how'd you get that listing up, today, Steve Volkers, but instead, like, how do we come together, as a community and then move forward in this new normal? So I just think what you said is really lovely. And I think that every business owner could take a point from that? Are you doing Zoom meetings for your meetings? You know, are you finding a way to do more video so that your clients feel more comfortable? We want hope right now, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
We want
I
hope.
think Sarah said it really well, and I'm hearing it from you, Aaron. I think as we interview more of these leaders, we're going to hear the same thing, and that's like the speed of adoption is critical right now, right?
Yeah.
Like the speed of innovation is critical right now. So it's like you guys had the ability to serve people in the way of like, we'll give you equipment or we'll give you knowledge, but you still have to do the work. You still have to get going and adopt. And adoption can't take you 3 months or 6 months while you figure it out anymore.
Yeah.
It's like if you want to be a church and serve your congregation, that's in 2 days from now, or that's in 4 days from now. You have to innovate from here to there in 4 days, which you probably would have put a master plan together. You would have had like a congregational meeting about, you would have voted on a budget for, right? Like,
now we're just gonna go. We're going.
right.
Yeah.
Now it's like, no, we don't have any of that. Like this is what we need to do to move ahead, and we either adopt or we die, right? And so it's fascinating as we talked to Sarah yesterday. You know, Sarah's speed is like 5,000 times anybody's speed. But if I can get 10% of her speed, I feel like I'm ahead. I think that's what I'm hearing from you, Aaron. It's just like, okay, like we were ahead already, right, in some of this stuff, but some of it you've got obviously bigger issues because you've got, you know, more overhead, more campuses, more people, so you're gonna have your own issues, right? But ultimately, like, it's speed. How quickly can we move to this thing and then make a decision and keep going, right?
Yeah, those are some really interesting thoughts. You know, a mantra that we've been using on our leadership team is just that constraint leads to creativity. And so here we are stuck in our homes, or, you know, not allowed to meet together. But there is opportunity here. And I believe that the people, the organizations, the leaders that can adapt and can innovate and get creative will become stronger and better. And so that, I think that's important. Something else is that on the one hand, you have to be really fast and adapt. On the other hand, the expectation has dropped a little bit. And what I mean by that is, you know, we were, I would say probably most people that would come to our church, and I'll try to say this in a way that, well, we'll see how it comes out. You know, you come to our church when we gather together, and it's like, oh wow, those are really good musicians, and oh wow, they have really nice lights, and oh wow, you know, the video looks really good. Like, we have a value of excellence, and we believe that, you know, that honors God, and it, you know, it helps people come to know God. Well, now we're in a situation where all that is kind of thrown out the window, and we're purposely filming with iPhones. I hosted our church service through Zoom with our campus pastors, and, you know, the audio is terrible. And the reason is because what people really want right now is connection and authenticity.
Yeah.
And so even if, you know, you're a small organization and you're going, okay, well, shoot, how do I compete with all the social media stuff that everybody's doing? Like, it's not about that. It's about vulnerability, authenticity, you know, and that's what people are resonating with right now. And so some things that we've been doing that have been really successful are, we have a noon prayer time with, you know, leaders in our church and their families. You know, we had one of our women's ministry staff at a kitchen table with her husband and her 2 teenage daughters, and they're doing Facebook Live prayer with people, and it was awesome. And that, I think, is what people are craving for right now. We're stuck in our houses, but we're seeing the real you, and we're connecting with you, and so all of us can do that, right? Because we all have a phone that, you know, can do that. And and so on the one hand, it's really hard. On the other hand, it maybe isn't that hard right now.
Yeah. So, Aaron, just on a personal level, I guess, just knowing you a little bit, and maybe this makes you a little bit more vulnerable because I know you so well. But you know, we've talked, and Sarah mentioned it the other yesterday. But this idea of, okay, well, I am perfectly suited to do this job of being on stage in front of, 5,000, 8,000 people, whatever that, like, that's what I'm suited for. That's what my disc profile tells me. You name the personality profile.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you're leading by Zoom calls and you're having to have personal one-on-one conversations with more and more people, which is not necessarily what you thought you were designed for, right? How is that shifted, right? Like that idea of like, okay, like I'm perfectly designed to go out and meet with people and hang with people. I don't know if I'm personally designed to have one-on-one conversations, but you're being thrown into that. Like, can you help me think through that? Or those that are saying, well, the job I had a week and a half ago, I have to do something completely different now because that skill set is not the skill set I need to be using now. How are you balancing that shift in your personal world right now?
Oh man, that's a real challenge. I feel like I've been investing my whole career into one form of how we do church, and that currently is thrown out the window. And so I think a big part of my leadership right now is that the people under my leadership are all experiencing that, where it's like, this is what I love to do. This is what I was paid to do. This is what I'm good at. And now I can't do it in the ways that I've trained and that I love. And so every one of us is sort of grieving the loss of some things that we really care about. And so I'm trying to navigate that personally. But as a leader, I think it's my responsibility and my privilege to walk people through that sense of loss and allow them to grieve, and then push them and encourage them to be creative. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, I mean, this is the nastiest situation that probably, man, I'm hoping any of us ever go through in our lives in terms of economic impact, and if some of the projections are coming true, and just how difficult this is going to be. Like I'm just trying to acknowledge with the people I lead, this is really bad and it's really hard and it's no fun. And so let's be real about that. Let's walk through that, and how can I be helpful, And so I guess truly this season for me as a leader is less about productivity, because so much of that has been shut down. I feel like I'm 20% as productive as I used to be, but it's about caring for people. And in my line of work, it's about shepherding people, pastoring people, including my own family and my kids, just recognizing I'm not going to be nearly as productive. Steve, you and I were talking about this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nonsense working at home, I got 5 kids, but that's probably not what I'm called to do in this season, is to be 110% productive. Oh, hey, that's your CrossFit call. You're supposed to be doing stuff right now. Yeah. So.
That's the thing. Goodness, I'm sorry.
Are you going to show us CrossFit moves, Megan? I mean, that would be a whole nother level.
I don't know. Never know with me, really. But you never know.
Yeah, I think, Aaron, thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's a point that we don't know how to communicate or don't know how to deal with. And Megan and I, we have both grieved loss of close people to us, right? Life sessions that we've had that maybe allow some of us to mentally be in a different space about grieving, but there's so many that have not seen loss, right? And so it's hard to claim like the loss of me going out and showing houses. I'm grieving that, right? For me not to go give Megan a hug, and Megan's a good hugger, like I'm grieving that right now, right? Like that is a space, right? Megan grieving not being with her friends at CrossFit and having to do it over whatever, a device, right? Those are real feelings, and it's okay to have those real feelings, and that doesn't make you less human. It actually makes you more human, right?
Yeah.
Well, and we have Steve and I have talked about this. We have a mental health person, that we're looking at to do this with, but I mean, that's real too, right? So for me, I think it's interesting, Steve, you used, Mr. Rogers, and I remember my grandparents saying that when I was little, always look for the helpers.
Right.
And I did watch him on BBC in Canada, and, it's interesting to think, okay, I can't do this right now, right? I can't go out and transact real estate, but it's causing me to go back into time, talent, and treasure. Like what else did my original download come with? And where can I serve inside of that space? And some of these nonprofit leaders that I've talked to, because, you know, I've had the opportunity to sit on boards, like they just need to be able to vent, and they don't really want to do that to their board necessarily, because they're supposed to be put together and it's supposed to be okay. So I think it's so beautiful to just tell the truth and be like, this blows, like this is not a good time right now. And be authentic in that space too, right? Like, it's really, really kind. It's very important, I think, what you just said, Aaron, for every business owner and everybody else to be able to say, just for a moment, I see your pain. I understand it. I've got some too. How can I be a helper?
Yep.
You
That's
know?
right. Yeah. There's a Christian practice that comes from the book of Psalms, which, apologies to those of you who are not church people, but I think it's still valuable, is there's a type of psalm that's called a lament.
Yeah.
And the purpose of that psalm is really to express grief and sorrow. And in some of those poems or songs, they end on a positive note with trust, you know, trusting God, and, you know, this is what's going on and it sucks and I hate this and I wish it wasn't happened, but I trust you. And some of them don't. Some of them just end on this like gnarly, everything is terrible. And I think we have those psalms recorded in the scriptures because we need them for seasons like this. And if we're not expressing the pain and the sorrow and the grief, and we're not as leaders helping others do it, it's going to be bad for us.
Right.
You know, that stuff has got to come out. And if we just keep plowing ahead, like, you know what, this is going to be over in a couple of weeks, or, you know what, we're just going to figure it out. And, you know, that's not good for our mental space, our health, our relationships, or anything.
It's such an interesting leadership balance, right? Because you both want to sit there for a second, but then you also want to say, okay, can we set that down right now? Like, it's too heavy. And so I feel like there's a level of whiplash in most of the people that I talk to, or leading organizations or otherwise. Because if you stuff that, and my friend Monica is lovely, and she'll say, you know, you put it in your basement, it'll fly back up. Eventually, the boxes in the basement, you know, will hit the stairs. It'll get ugly. But it is quite a juxtaposition to be in that, the lamenting piece of it. Like, man, I didn't think I was going to give up this much for Lent. And then also moving forward to, but let's not, you know, let's not drown there either.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, we have to keep moving. You know, we have to keep working. There's stuff that needs to be done. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So, you guys, so Aaron, you guys have also just moved very quickly into the social media game, right? So I'd love to just hear your thoughts on that, as sort of, even maybe as we start closing down, but on this idea of shifting in conversation to being more online, right? So this is very much connected to individuals next to each other, right? To be in present of each other, no longer in present of each other. And so really it felt like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, you're like, oh, hey, there's this other thing that we used to play with, but now we're all into it, right? Can you help us in that understanding of like why an organization, a nonprofit, or even a for-profit company has to move into that space more? Is that just for better connectivity? Is that communication? Like, where did that transition for your organization, and why is it part of the ethos of what you're doing right now?
Yeah, it's a huge part. I mean, you were talking earlier about kind of flexing your job into, you know, this new space. And I've always had an Instagram and a Facebook, but that's not really, I post pictures of my kids, you know, that's my interaction with the world. But now it feels like a third of my job is social media. And so we've had to shift, because that's where people are. and that's our opportunity to connect with people. And as a church, we want to connect with people, help people connect with each other, and connect people to God. And the environment for us to do that most effectively right now is through social media, because everybody is there and we can't meet in person. And so we've just been leveraging that. But I think there's also a risk in social media in that everybody's using it, everybody's putting all kinds of content on there. And so we have tried to be very simple in our approach, because if you over communicate, people, swipe, gone, it's just too much. And so like one message a week, not like one post, but one marketing strategy, if you will, for last week for us, it was stay engaged. That's really all we were saying to our people. Stay engaged with each other, stay engaged with your church, stay engaged with God, type of thing. And so you can't have, this department's posting that and that group's posting this and all different language. It just, then you're not saying anything.
Right.
So and it's been a challenge because we're a large organization with a bunch of different ministries, and several different ministry departments, whatever you want to call them, have their own social media accounts. And it's kind of like, all right, we got to all sync up and communicate clearly, so that our people don't just tune us out. But it's been a huge opportunity for us to connect. And like I said earlier, to kind of be more authentic and real and kind of behind the curtains type of thing. And it's been a beautiful thing for us to connect in that way. And I think that we're learning some things in this new space that we will carry forward. And I believe we'll do things differently with social media when we return to normal life, whatever that looks like. And I think that's part of the opportunity in this space, is we're going to learn some new strategies and practices as families, as leaders, as organizations, that will make us more effective and stronger and better if we put in the time to figure out, and evaluate how to do those things.
Oh, it's good stuff, Megan. I think I'm good ending there. I think that's the point, right? Is how are we leading, and then ultimately that in leading and moving quickly, right? Not foolishly, but quickly into that idea of I love it. Constraint equals creativity. If we can do that quickly, ultimately the beauty that can come out of the backside of this thing, right? And so not to sit backwards and just wait for it to blow over, but actually engaging in it now equals the opportunity later, right?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Megan, you got anything to add or any thoughts to finalize with?
I'm really grateful to meet you. Obviously I can't go to your church this Sunday, but I would if I could. And I feel better knowing that you're a helper in the world. Obviously it's not a religious show, but I think most people know where Steve and I are. So I'll be praying for you and all the people who are leading large groups of people like that. I have a lot of gratitude for what you're doing. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much. Guys, it's a real privilege to be on your show, and nice to meet you, Megan. Steve, I'll see you around.
Well, thank you all for joining us of our number 2 leadership conversation. Rochelle Scott, I think, is tomorrow is our plan. We also, with the quick learning and the announcements from the governor, we're working on trying to get a principal or something on soon, just to talk about how they're leading and how we can lead our children through this experience. I think is something that Megan and I deal with every day, and so does Aaron. And we look forward to trying to bring some of that information for those that are leading children in this experience. So thanks for tuning in.
Sarah Howard coming up on Tuesday for all the people who have questions
Perfect.
about unemployment and self-employed and how complicated and complex that is. So, and Sarah Howard is friends with Sarah Lockman Gray, if you like that one.
All the Sarahs.
All the Sarahs. We got all the Sarahs.
It's good. All right. Well, we'll sign off. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Aaron.
Bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.